Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 2018 Mississippi PowerShell User Group meeting. Tonight we've got Brandon Olin, who's presenting Invoke ChatOps, Level Up and Change Your Culture with Chat and PowerShell. And I'll turn it over to you, Brandon.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Like I said, my name is Brandon Olin. You can also find me on Twitter at DevBlackOps. I'm fairly active on there. And this is a session on learning about ChatOps and how you can use ChatOps in combination of PowerShell to basically improve your culture at work. And so with that, let's get started. The slides and code for this presentation are here. This points to a GitHub repository for some of the demo content that I'll be presenting, as well as the slide deck. Here's the agenda that I'm going to be talking about. I'll give you a brief kind of definition of what is ChatOps, some of the problems / opportunities that this can help resolve, some of the benefits of adopting this can have on your organization, an overview of some of the other frameworks that are pretty common in ChatOps, in the ChatOps community, different tools, different languages, some just examples of what would you use ChatOps for in your environment, and then the bulk of this presentation will be on PoshBot, which, as the name implies, is a PowerShell-based bot framework, and I'll be giving a fair amount of demos on how to use PoshBot in different types of scenarios, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end, or if someone has a question they really want to ask, they can chime in at any time. So what is ChatOps? Essentially, ChatOps is what James Fryman here said, is we're taking the things we're already doing and we're putting them in line with the conversations that we're already having. So what that really means is you're already doing this work in your day-to-day job. You're rebooting servers, you're building new servers, you're restarting services, you're creating accounts, and all those day-to-day admin type activities. And you're also having conversations with different people at work. And what ChatOps is really about is bringing those two things together. So you can be having a conversation with someone, they ask for something, you can run a command to go and do that for them, or even better yet, they can run a command in a chat window and have that script execute automatically for them. Cuts a lot of waste out of the system, a lot of queuing time, a lot of reducing tickets, reducing handoffs between team and team, and all kinds of things like that. Here's another definition of what ChatOps is from Atlassian. I'm not going to go over it. You can read that. But this is really kind of the kind of gets to the core of what ChatOps is trying to fix. So we've always, everyone here has probably experienced this type of issue. Someone calls up or chats in a chat medium of some sort, saying they have a problem on a server. They don't know what's wrong, and they ask you to take a look. And the person receiving that message, maybe as a frontline service desk worker, an operations type person, they don't necessarily have the knowledge or skills to figure out what's wrong with that. So they hand it off to someone else, usually a tier 3 or some type of escalation. What that person does, in this case it's Brett, our favorite person from the Phoenix project. He saves the day, fixes the problem. Bob is happy, but there's a series of problems that have happened here, and I'll just kind of go over what they are. Improving context. So the notification of a problem is decoupled from how it was resolved, is the fundamental issue here. Someone reports a problem either via chat or email or a service desk ticket. It gets resolved completely out of band, and no one has visibility into exactly what happened to fix that problem. And no one learns anything from that experience. except for Brett. Sharing knowledge is another thing that ChatOps can address. Sally, a support person or operation person, didn't learn anything from this as well. She got a ticket, she handed it off to someone else to go resolve, and she didn't learn anything from that. Empowering the team, kind of the fundamental question is, why can't Bob, in this case, do this action himself? If he's an application owner and they have a problem with the application, why can't Bob fix his own problem? Why would he have to send a service desk ticket, go through a series of escalations to ultimately get to an engineering firm or tier 3 group to fix a problem? Why can't he do that himself? And by doing that, you reduce your mean time to resolution. You can address and fix problems much more quickly. And ultimately, you have less Brents in the organization. And for those who haven't read or listened to the audiobook of the Phoenix Project, Brett is an essential person in the organization in that story. He seems to be involved in every project. He is badly overcommitted. Everything seems to has to get resolved by Brent. And ultimately, for small tasks, they tend to take longer when there's more queuing involved. And if you have many tasks that have to go through one person, they all have to wait a long time. So ultimately, what we want to do here is reduce the steps involved to fix a problem. And ultimately, we want to eliminate Brent, not the person, but the human bottleneck that he represents. This is another way of looking at what I just said here. These are some of the social and technical benefits of what ChatOps is, and I'm not going to go through them too deeply, other than you can increase knowledge amongst teams. You can empower technical or non-technical people to fix their problems for them. You can enable running commands inside a chat window enables better logging and enables better situational awareness. Everyone seems to has a better idea of what's going on. You obviously increase your automation by doing this. You can improve your safety in that the commands you're running inside a chat window are tailored for an environment and you can't deviate from them. Here's an example of some of the more common the ChatOps frameworks out there. Hubot is probably one of the most popular. This is a JavaScript-based bot that originally got written by GitHub. Some other popular ones are Airbot, Cog, and Lita. And you'll notice that all of these bots, these bot frameworks are they're getting written in one language, and that's usually whatever the favorite language of the developer is. And they support that environment inherently well, and other languages not so well. What I noticed last year was that there wasn't a very good bot experience written in PowerShell, and that's my language of choice, and I decided to write one in Poshbot here, and that's the one I'm going to give you an overview of today. But ultimately, there's bots in every language out there, and if you want to look at ChatOps in your organization, you can pick a bot framework that was probably written in the language of your choice. So what can you do with bots and ChatOps? Here's some examples. You can restart services. You can get or resolve service desk tickets, query remote APIs for information, modify Active Directory group memberships, create VMs, get the status of automated processes, pull some performance graphs out of your monitoring system, query those monitoring systems for status, kick off CI/CD pipelines, and of course slap people with trout, because that's what we always want to do. So Poshbot is a bot that I wrote, like I said, last year, and here's some of the kind of features or capabilities of it that I'm going to get, once I get into the demo, you'll see these. It's nearly 100% class-based, PowerShell class-based, so it requires PowerShell 5 and above. It packages bot commands into PowerShell modules. So the experience of someone writing PowerShell is very familiar. All you're doing is writing functions or commandlets inside a module. So that module gets loaded into PoshBot and gets exposed as commands that you can run, in this case from Slack, which I'll show you. It has a notion of role-based access control, so you can assign permissions to commands. You can roll up those permissions into a role, assign people to groups, and you can mix and match these in various ways to tailor exactly what commands a group of people can run and what they can't run. There's a basic scheduling system inside PoshBot where you can say you want to have a command run once a day or every few hours. You can do some basic scheduling of commands in PoshBot. There's a notion of command approvals, and this is kind of like the to launch the missile, you have to have two people turn the keys simultaneously type scenario. You may have a particularly powerful or sensitive command that you want to allow someone to run, but you also want to force that to be approved by another person so they have awareness of what is going on. There's a capability to do that. And parameter injection is a capability of, you're writing these commands and modules, and ideally these modules would be distributed to somewhere like a PowerShell gallery. You obviously can't or shouldn't distribute credentials or sensitive information inside that module, but you want to be able to inject that information at runtime when you run the commands. So PoshBot has the capability to do that, which I'll show you. It also has the notion of stateful data. Every command in PoshBot gets executed as a PowerShell job. So they're essentially stateless. A command gets run, a job gets spun up, it runs the command, it gets torn down. No data is saved there. But PoshBot does provide a capability to save some state, and I'll show you some use cases where you can do that. You can also whitelist and blacklist commands inside channels inside Slack. If you want to enforce certain channels or use for certain use cases and others for other use cases. And multiple chat networks with an asterisk. Currently, Slack is really the only supported chat system that PoshBot supports. Many people have asked for team support, and there are some technical issues with that, but I'll go into that if people would like. But it is something that I do want to support. And that's it for the presentation. And we can jump right into the demo. And I'll stop right here real quick if anyone has any quick questions. No? Okay.
Brandon, we did have
Sure.
one thing. One person did say that he wanted to hear about Teams.
Okay. Well, I can speak to Teams at the end.
Okay.
And why that's not supported right now. But yeah, that's a common ask. All right. So here's my little rundown here of what I'm going to show you. And first off, I'm going to start the bot. And so PoshBot is just a PowerShell module. And this is a quick way to get it started. We're going to import the module. We're going to load a configuration file, which I'll show you. Create an instance of a back end. And a back end in PoshBot's terminology is a representation of a chat network. So it's written in PowerShell classes, so there's a Slack implementation of a backend, and in the future there will be a Teams implementation and a HipChat implementation or an IRC implementation. And so you create an instance of that backend, create an instance of the bot, and start it up. And there's a few different ways PoshBot can start. It can start interactively, which I'll show you here. You can also run it as a service or a scheduled task. Okay, so now it is started. What I did here is I imported the module and I loaded a configuration file, and this is what this configuration file looks like. It's a PowerShell hash table with a bunch of settings to configure how PowerShell operates, and I can go through these as I kind of show some of the demos. But what this has in it is the credentials to connect to Slack, settings such as what is the name of the bot, some parameters that can get injected at runtime into commands and so forth. So the bot is started now, and I should see it here. Let me invite him. And you can see on the left here, as I start typing, it's receiving messages from Slack in real time. Just want to verify that he's running. He's been running for 1 minute. Okay. So what I've just run here is essentially under the cover is PowerShell functions. There's a function called about and a function called status, and PowerShell has parsed to the command that got entered into Slack, matched that string to a registered command in the bot, which got mapped into a function that the bot knows about to execute, and executed that function, returned the results back to Slack. And that's fundamentally what PowerShell is doing under the covers. There's lots of built-in commands to kind of install and remove plugins, create user groups, create roles, manage permissions, and so forth, disable plugins and things like that. One of the common one that you're probably going to run if you use PowerShell is help. It should have a pretty familiar experience with people doing PowerShell, as you can run help on a function and get the comment-based help from a function. PowerShell understands how to load those commands and display that help. And I can run help against the help command itself and show you the usage, how to run that command. And you can see this is equivalent of doing get help against a function with the examples switch. So let's see what kind of plugins we have loaded. We have the built-in one. PowerShell has this built-in plugin. This is where all the built-in commands for PowerShell live. It's just a PowerShell module that's shipped alongside PowerShell. And we can get the more details about that built-in plugin and see the various commands. These map to PowerShell functions that reside in there. So we have a total of 39. There is some associated permissions that get shipped along with this plugin. I'll go over what permissions are in a little bit. You can also run a command to find plugin. And what this does is this actually searches the PowerShell gallery for PowerShell modules that have either the PowerShell in the name of the module or the PowerShell tag attached to it. So you can see here, these are the ones that currently reside on the PowerShell gallery, and you can take a look at these, and I'm going to actually install a few of these to take a look at. To install a plugin, I call them plugins. What plugins are to PowerShell is really just PowerShell modules. I call them plugins because there's a little bit of extra metadata you can add into the module manifest of these modules to have PowerShell operate on them a little differently. So we just installed the PowerShell.giphy PowerShell module from the PowerShell gallery. got installed on my system, and I registered with the bot. And you can see it exposes one command called Giphy. So some of these commands, some of these modules are on the PowerShell gallery. Most of them I wrote, and these are just examples of fun things you can do with PoshBot. I was happy to see yesterday that I noticed that someone out there wrote a VMware plugin, and this basically is a PoshBot plugin that can snapshot and remove snapshots of VMs. And I bet that will be extended over time, but that's a pretty cool capability that you can have in this. PoshBot.Wolfram is a plugin that will interface with Wolfram Alpha's API to ask questions. I saw a tweet by Doug Fink some time ago about how to, a couple-line PowerShell script on how to query Wolfram Alpha. I thought I really liked it. I wanted to make a PoshBot plugin out of that. So you have a command here called ask Wolfram that will go and query Wolfram Alpha's API. That's pretty cool, and I can show you that in a second. Nameit, if you don't know, is a PowerShell module that's fairly popular out there, and it's not associated with PoshBot in any way. It's just a normal PowerShell module. But I use this as a demo to show that PoshBot can import PowerShell modules that aren't designed explicitly for PoshBot. And this is a good module because it just deals with string data. It's basically a module that generates random text in various forms. And it's a good demo module to show. So one of the commands that it exposes is called person. So if I can actually just run that command, and it's running the Nameit module. There's another one called address, which generates a random address. And most of the rest of the demo, I'm going to show you some. This is not a module that's published on the PowerShell gallery, but it's specifically designed to showcase. Oh, if I can spell. It's specifically designed to showcase some different capabilities of PoshBot. So everything I've been showing you so far has been commands that have been triggered based on, putting like a bang and then a keyword, meaning the actual command to run. And that's normally how you would probably use PoshBot. You can say, so one of the commands I just imported was get command or get hello world. If you look at that module, you can see what that looks like. So you can see this get hello world function, completely vanilla PowerShell. And I can execute it here. You can see PoshBot returned an error because I didn't specify a mandatory parameter, because obviously we're requiring the name to be mandatory. So PoshBot supports reading the error stream of commands and presenting that back to you. Spell. And there you go. This warning here is a function of me running PoshBot on a Mac right now, which I can get to later about some of the current issues with that. But normally running this on Windows would produce a green check mark if the function ran successfully. So these are command triggers is what we're looking at here. There's another way you can do this is PoshBot supports an alternate way to address the bot. If I look at the configuration for PoshBot, we're saying that the command prefix is a bang symbol. Now you can change that to anything you want if you wanted to do a command trigger based on a different character. What you can also do is address Poshbot by different names. In this case, I'm going to say it's also known by Hal and Bender. And the combination of this alternate command prefix and also this separator character that you can use allows you to address Poshbot in different ways. So I can say Bender and a colon, and it will respond the same if I just did help. And that's really just a convenience for how some people want to address bots in their chat window. But command triggers are probably the most common way you interact with Poshbot. Another kind of useful capability, though, is specifically with Slack, it emits events that are happening as people are chatting and creating channels and joining channels and changing topics and starring messages and whatnot. All of those are events that aren't explicitly messages that someone typed into the chat window, but you can trigger off them in the same way. So here, I'm going to show you a command that triggers.
Hey, Brandon.
Sure.
Those commands, are they case sensitive?
They are not.
And are the plugins required, or can you just import those modules and call those commands without plugins?
They are one of the same. So this Poshbot PS Summit module, it is just a normal PowerShell module, and I'll get into a couple of the extra things you can add to them that make them what I would consider a Poshbot plugin. But Poshbot itself can actually just import any PowerShell module and execute the commands within any kind of exported function or commandlet that module exposes. Poshbot will be able to execute. The catch is that since we're operating in a chat window, we can't like feed in a PowerShell credential and pipe that into a function. That kind of concept doesn't really work inside a chat window. So typically you're going to be dealing with integers and string type input data. That's one caveat. Does that answer the question?
He's typing.
Oh.
He said yes.
Okay. So let me show you some of that extra attributes you can assign to a function to make it operate differently inside Poshbot. And this is a good example, is a function that you want to trigger based on an event and not someone explicitly typing something in a window. So if I take a look at this this function called channel topic change, all it really does is output some text. But it does have this extra attribute that I've attached to the function, just like you would normally do with commandlet binding attribute. This is a custom attribute that I created that's inside Poshbot, and this is how you tell Poshbot to do things differently with these functions. And there's various things you can do. In this case, we're telling Poshbot to not treat this function like it was a normal command. We want it to be triggered based on an event, and then we also want to have it trigger on a specific type of event that gets emitted back from the chat network. In this case, we're saying when an event gets sent back saying channel topic changed, then fire this command. So if I do that in here, and I can do this in Slack, because I can change the topic, you can see that Poshbot fired off and executed that function. But I didn't have to explicitly execute that function. That's a common use for events here, is you can have events, functions get triggered off of people joining rooms, you want to send them a greeting, or people leaving rooms, or people changing topics and starring different messages. It's definitely not as common as explicitly executing commands, but it's something that you can do. The other common thing you can do is trigger messages based on a regex expression. So if I look at a function that I wrote called cookies, this is again using the custom PoshBot attribute, and we're saying don't execute this command. If I just said, exclamation point cookies, we want to trigger it based on evaluating a regex expression. And we're just saying if you find the regex cookies in the message at all, then fire the command. So if I can say here,
We have another question, Brandon.
sure,
One person
go ahead.
said, or they said, they see the font has personality. Is that customizable?
That is. This is a custom module I wrote. This doesn't ship with PoshBot itself. This is just an example of functions that you could write. But the core PoshBot module itself doesn't ship with commands that give you snarky responses to messages. Did that answer the question?
It did. He said it was very cool.
Okay, great. So you can see here that I just wrote a plain text string, and PoshBot matched that string to the regex that I have here into this command. It matched. You can have as complex a regex expression as you want in here. In this case, it's a very simple one, but that's another way that you can have commands get executed. If someone says a magic word in Slack, then you can have a command execute. Here's another, if I had to say, looks good to me, ship it. And you can have it respond back with a funny image or something like that. So if we look at that function here, it's triggering off of ship it if it sees that string anywhere in the message. And then also I have some just random links to some squirrel images, and I just pick one at random and I return it back. Very simple function here. So that's the three types of triggers that you can have PoshBot do. So command triggers is probably going to be the most common, event-based triggers, and regex-based triggers. It also has the capability to parse a fairly complex command that you enter. In this case, I'm running a command and I'm saying pass in 3 strings into the thing1 parameter and 1 integer into thing2. So if we look at that, and also return 2 separate items in the output stream. But if you notice this function here, there's nothing special about it. There's no PoshBot specific syntax or anything. All I'm doing is accepting 2 parameters and returning 2 different objects to the output stream.
We have another question, Brandon.
Sure.
When multiple magic words for different functions, cookies need ship it. Does that make sense? He's typing.
Is the question?
Do they conflict? Or
right?
run?
Right now, I believe the first one that matches wins, and that is something that I think I've planned to change. But I'll be curious to hear what people think about that. Would you want the first match to run, or do you want all matches to run, all commands that would match that expression, or maybe even have that at configurable setting?
Configurable, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So errors. Everyone writes perfect code, right? So here is an example of I'm executing a command and I didn't write it very well. I'm producing a couple errors. PoshBot natively understands the error stream of executing a PowerShell command, and we'll return that back formatted for us inside Slack. So if we look at that command, bad command, all I'm doing is just normal write error. This will work the same if you were doing a throw as well. Again, nothing special about PoshBot inside this command. It's just a normal function that is throwing some errors. And PoshBot will see that and consider the function or the command has failed if it sees something in the output stream, or excuse me, and sees something in the error stream. Here's another example here, create VM. So, and this is some of the more useful things you can actually start building with PoshBot, is actually doing real work. In this case, I'm going to run a command to create a VM. And oh no, I don't, it didn't pass my parameter validation. This is just normal PowerShell rules under the covers, is that I passed the value F to the type parameter, which doesn't match the validate set, Linux or Windows. That would be the same message you would get back from the command line. So if we run it again, matching the rules, you can see we created, well, we didn't really create a VM. I just showed some output like I was going to. Here, and this is another capability of PoshBot. So you'll notice here that the actual PowerShell function is called create VM. But I didn't say create -VM in Slack. I said create VM, one word. This is another capability in PoshBot, is that you can have functions be known as different things than the actual PowerShell function is called. And this is more for convenience saying maybe you don't want to use the traditional verb noun method inside in ChatOps. You want to do just one word, or you want to have a command be known by multiple things. You can do that as well, that I'll show you. But you can see here, typical PowerShell parameter validation going on. We only accept Linux and Windows to the value of this parameter, and this is a best practice inside PoshBot, is to put as many guardrails as you can into these functions, so they only do what they're explicitly designed to do. So if you're going to have a create VM function, have some sensible validation on some of the parameters you have here. Here's another capability is here. As you noticed, I got this card response with a green bar here. That is the capability of PoshBot, in that you can send, if you know what cards are in Slack, you can do custom formatting of your return of your message that you return to Slack. New PoshBot card response is how you would do that inside PoshBot, as you would say the title of the card, the message, and a couple other parameters as well that you can tailor this response back. So you can see I have a title and I have a message here. If I had an error, I could designate an error switch, in which case this card response would be a red bar. Aliases. So I kind of just went over this. So let's look at this function called getRandomNumber. What I'm doing here is I'm telling PoshBot to not only accept running the command under the name getRandomNumber, but also under rand and rnd. So if I say getRandomNumber, I should be able to get back a random number. But I can also say rnd or rand, and both those are perfectly valid and run the same command. And again, that's just another capability of a specific property that you can attach to the PoshBot bot command attribute that you append or that you attach to these functions. So permissions. So this is a more complicated topic, but let me show you what this would be. This is kind of where some of the real power comes from. Is if I want to run this command called get secret plan, which I don't have permission to run because it's obviously a sensitive command. Let's look at why I don't have that. I've said in PoshBot that you need to have the get secrets permission in order to execute this. And my user does not have that. So let's go, but since I'm myself an admin in PoshBot, I can grant myself this right by adding this permission into the role admin, which I'm a member of. And now I should be able to run that. So I did, and you notice it actually didn't respond back to the channel in which I executed that command. It actually sent it to me in a DM, because obviously this is sensitive information. So let's look at that function to see how it works. In this case, I've used another property of the bot command attribute called permissions, and this is where you list it one or more permissions that you need to be a member of to be able to execute this command. And this is just normal PowerShell where I'm just generating a CSV file. But what I am doing is actually uploading a file back up to Slack, not just sending it some text. So you can use you can write some custom PowerShell to generate CSVs or PDFs or Excels or images, or zip up something and send that back. All of those are supported because all you're doing is uploading a file back to Slack. And what I've also done is I've used the -DM switch. What that forces PoshBot to do is to not respond back to the channel in which it saw the command, but to actually DM the person who executed the command. So if you have sensitive information that you want to be able to get to via PoshBot, but you don't want to necessarily make that public to someone, this is a way that you can have that command directly message a person. Let's see, is there any interest of time? I'll skip ahead just a little bit. So here's another function called remove something, and this is another pattern that you could also do. Remove something, oops, remote. I'm going to execute this command, and it's going to say, nope, are you sure you want to do this? This is kind of mimicking the what if behavior or the confirm behavior in PowerShell. As I can say, are you sure you really want to do this? And if you do, well, don't use that because that doesn't exist. Force. And then it will actually execute the command. And to see that, that was the create. Oh, the remove something. So this is just simple logic in here that he's saying, if I didn't see the force switch, respond back with a response, send a response saying, do you want to actually do this? If you do see the switch, then actually run the command and do it. PoshBot also supports running multiple commands in parallel, because if you're going to be creating a VM that could potentially take quite a long time to execute, you can't build a VM in a second, and you want to have multiple people being executed to be able to execute commands and not wait on each other. And since these are all executed as PowerShell jobs, PoshBot can spin off the jobs and check on the status of all of them as they're executing. So if I say start long running command, I'm going to fire off a job that's going to run for a little bit, but I can also run other commands while that is happening. So if I look at this start long running command, all it's doing is sleeping for 20 seconds by default. So in just a few seconds, you should come back, and there it is. It responded back, it completed. And by default, you get that. You get PoshBot can spin off multiple jobs at once. It also has the notion of a basic notion of scheduling the commands. So if I say get scheduled command, I have nothing scheduled. In this case, the man command is just an alias for help. So I can say, give me the help on anything that matches the word schedule. And these are the various built-in commands that match that. So I'm going to say man new schedule. This will give me the comment-based help for how to run that command. And let's say I want to create a new command to be run every 10 seconds. Probably too quick for something for real, but maybe you wanted to have a command get executed automatically every day. So I'm going to say I want to run the status command every 10 seconds. And now let's look at the existing schedules out there, and I can see it here. And see, it just got executed, and it will execute again in a few seconds. And these scheduled commands appear to PoshBot like they were entered interactively by the user who scheduled it, if that makes sense to people. So if I want to run a command and schedule it, to PoshBot it's going to look like I'm the one who's interactively running that command every 10 seconds. So if that user who schedules it inherently needs to have the permission to run that command. So let's remove that schedule. And now I should have nothing in there. So here's an interesting one, command approvals. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Yeah, we've got one. Does the scheduled jobs, let's see, does the scheduled jobs die if PoshBot crashes?
No. So let me show you that real quick. So let's add a new schedule back. And this is not something I haven't shown you so far. And so I have a schedule. Now, what PoshBot has been doing behind the scenes is that in the directory where you have your configuration, it is creating these separate PowerShell data files. And this is so PoshBot can get executed as a service or run interactively, stopped. You can restart the server. And it keeps all the state of what modules have been loaded, what schedules need to get executed, the membership of various groups and roles. All of that is saved inside these hash tables, essentially. So if I can look at the schedules hash table, it can see that I have a schedule, the values to execute that in, what is the actual message that it's going to send to PoshBot. So it's going to appear like it came from my user, and it's going to appear like I'm running the status command. So PoshBot could crash, you start it back up, none of these settings are lost. The same with permissions. All of that information is stored here, and also plugins. So as I've been loading plugins in the PoshBot, you can see them here. And again, I can restart PoshBot. It'll start back up. If this file does exist, it will load this and re-import all of these plugins. So okay, you don't have to do that every time.
We've got one more. Does PoshBot support Skype for Business as a backend?
It does not. I haven't looked at how to do that. I imagine you'll probably run into the same challenges that Teams has, which I can go over what those are at the end. They're not insurmountable, but that's just something I haven't implemented yet. Okay, command approvals. So this is a scenario where you want to have someone be able to execute a command, but you want to have someone else check their work, or approve their command. So if I say deploy my app environment dev, I've configured PoshBot to require that command requires approval from a member of a specific group. And I can show you what that looks like. So here I'm saying you try to run this command, someone else in the designated approver groups needs to approve that by running this command to approve it or to explicitly deny that command. And how that gets configured is if this section of your bot configuration called approval configuration. And what I've said here is that by default, you'll have 30 minutes to approve or deny a command before it expires, and also the rules for what commands require approval. In this case, I'm saying a command called deploy my app that came from the PoshBot PS Summit module, any version, requires someone in either the admin or release groups to approve it. And peer approval is required in that I myself am a part of the admin group, and then since I tried to run this command, I can't approve my own command. You can choose to support that or not. So what I have here is another Slack window open under a different user, and this person will approve that command. And actually he can't because he himself is not part of the admin or release groups. So how do I fix that? Well, I can say add group user admin. So I'm going to add my other user to the admin group. Now that I have that, I should be able to approve that command. And it actually got run.
So does each user run their own instance of PoshBot, or is there only one instance for everyone?
You can have multiple. Generally, you would have one instance of PoshBot, and it would be loaded into various rooms inside Slack. But you only need one instance running. And it'll receive messages from every channel that it's a member of, or if you direct message it. So in this case, my personal Slack team, I have one instance of PoshBot running, and it's actually part of many channels that I have running in various different test scenarios. So if I execute a command in any one of those channels that it's a member of, it will respond. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Here's another capability is that you can notice that, and this is funny, since we were just having a discussion before this session about new verbs that got released in PowerShell 6. This is a function called Invoke Deploy My App. But I don't want that command to be known by that inside PoshBot. I can override that by using this command name here. So if I actually try to run this, it's not going to know what that is. it only knows this command by that name. I can run this again. Are you going to respond? Okay. And then I'm going to my other window here, I'm going to deny it. And if you wanted to see existing pending commands, you can always run the pending function. So those are command approvals. Channel rules is another capability. There are some cases where you just flat out don't want some commands run in certain channels. So in this case, in the general channel, maybe I don't want to allow the Giphy plugin to be executed. So if I try to run this command inside the general channel, actually go into that channel, it's going to say that's not been allowed. But I can run that command inside the user group channel. And I don't have any clue what that has to do with PowerShell. But how does that work? So if I look at the what am I looking at? Command channel rules section. I've said that in the general channel, allow all commands to be run except for commands that match this. So anything from the Giphy plugin are not allowed, but any other command is. And then I've also said every other command is allowed in all channels. So this goes from most specific in order to least specific. So if you had many different rules, you would want to have the most specific ones highlighted first down and progressively get less and less specific with your rules. Everything that I've been, so history here, everything that I've been running inside this has been logged. So I can look at every single execution that I've run during this demo, and I can even look at a specific one if I choose to. I can say history and get more information about that. Who executed it? What was the? Did it require approval? What was the exact command that got run? Its duration, and so forth. What's also here is that everything. Let me make sure I refresh this. It's also being written to a log file. And this is a series of JSON objects that have been written to a file that are a whole bunch of data about who requested a command to be executed, what was the result of that command, and a bunch of other information about the time, who approved it, what was it successful or failure, and so forth. All of that is logged in here. And there are various properties that you can configure to say how long you keep that history. And also there's a generic log file, and this is depending on what log level you've configured PowerShell. It can be fairly verbose, but it shows you a bunch of statuses about what PowerShell is doing internally. But there's also a separate log that is specifically just for what commands have been executed. Okay, so here's another one that's pretty common is, oh, I've already installed this, parameter injection. So this is a module that's on the PowerShell gallery, and in order to interact with the Wolfram Alpha API, you need an API key. You obviously don't want to distribute that with your module. So how does that work? Well, I can be able to run a command and just give it a generic question. Wolfram Alpha will respond back with an answer. So how does that work? So if I look at my config file here, and I'll change these API keys after the fact, but they're not. There's not a big deal here. I've said I have a section called plugin configuration, and what this means is that when it actually, let me get back to actually, let me show you this one. This is a better one to show. Shorten, since I can pull up this function real quick. So again, I need an API key to talk to Google's URL shortener. And I have an API key here. And in my shorten function, I am requiring a parameter called API key. But I've also tagged it with a special PoshBot attribute called fromConfig. And this means that when PoshBot executes this function, it's going to dynamically insert the value of this parameter when it executes it, and it's going to pull that value from the configuration. So you can distribute your plugins and functions and not have to distribute the secrets or credentials that are needed in order to execute those functions. You can supply those at runtime via your bot configuration, and you can store them in here. Does anyone have any questions on that before I go on?
Okay, we have somebody typing a message. Oh, he just said that's awesome.
Oh, thank you. One issue that you may see here is generally you don't want to put secrets in plain text inside this file. In this case, this is a hash table or PowerShell data file, so you can't put in a bunch of logic to encrypt data. But you can. There is capabilities in PoshBot to dynamically create this configuration at runtime. It's because it's just an object. So you can run a command to create a configuration, and it would be on you to go resolve your credentials from your password vault of choice, and then put them in the object, and then pass that object to PoshBot. So you can keep these secrets completely out of a file. You can dynamically get them from, Azure Key Vault or some type of password vault or something like that. But that would be a custom script, a custom startup script that you would write in order to start the bot. Okay, stateful data. This is coming up on the end here. Oftentimes, everything I've been running so far has been a command that's been executed inside a PowerShell job. So the job gets spun up, it does its thing, and it gets torn down, and no data has been saved. There are use cases where you want to have a PoshBot plugin be able to save the data over time. And there's a capability that actually Warren Frame and Cookie Monster added to PoshBot to be able to do this. And that this is, you can, inside your functions, you can save state and load it back in every time it gets executed. So let's look at the get my stuff function. What this is doing is running a command called get PoshBot stateful data. And what this is doing is internally it's looking for a XML file that's been saved locally to the bot configuration folder that's scoped to the module itself. So no other module can get at this data. And if you have data in that file, it will return that back to you. In this case, I have none, but let's go and create some. So let's run another command called set my stuff, in which case I'm just going to set a value, save it to stateful data, and return something. Set my stuff, name foo, value bar, and it saved it. And if I actually refresh my configuration folder here, you can see a state file here, and this is, basically an XML file. Internally it's running the export CLI XML commandlet to export that object and put it onto disk. And now I should be able to run my get my stuff function, and it will detect that I have a file now and return back a value. And it does. And I can also remove it. And it is removed. If I refresh this, you can see there's no data in here now. And if you had many PowerShell plugins saving state, you would have a file for each plugin that does that. Some kind of maybe not so practical use cases for what you would do with that is that you can actually play games over time using that. So I'm going to run a function to run a command to install a plugin from the PowerShell gallery. In this case, is a module that I wrote called Tic-Tac-Toe. And it takes a few seconds because it's actually installing it from the gallery. And we'll load it. What can we do with that plugin? These are the various commands you can run and the aliases for them. So I can say my games. I have none. And I'm going to start a game against my alter ego. And there I have a game started. You can see it's internally using stateful data to save that game state. And I can say mark v2 and the game that I'm playing. I'll mark it, and then I can go into my alter ego here, and I can say mark v1 and the game that he is playing against, or the player that he's playing against. And then you can have a series and back and forth and actually play a game over this. So that's stateful data. Does anyone have any questions on that?
None so
Nope.
far.
Okay. And let's see, and basically at the end here, so another thing you can do is, let me get the plugin, name it. So I have one instance of this plugin loaded, and it's version 1.8.3, but I can install multiple versions of that plugin. And maybe I want to execute a specific version of a command. So in this case, I also have now 1.8.0 loaded. So in order to do that, I would say name it, and then, so that was the name of the plugin, colon, the name of the command, colon, and then the version that I want to execute. In this case, I did that, and I'm going to say, I'll execute version 8.0 and 8.3. And you can also, maybe you installed a version of a plugin that doesn't act very well and you want to disable it. You can also disable a specific version of a plugin. And it's going to say I can't do that because it's disabled. Okay, and then running as a service. This is a document. I'm not going to go over, but this is This is how you would run PoshBot as a service. And it's basically running a small startup script to import the module, load your configuration file, and you basically wrap that in a while true loop, and then you use a utility, something like an SSM, to create a service from running that script. It's very simple to create a service with this, but you can take a look at that if you would like. And everything, all the documentation for PoshBot is at docs.poshbot.io. So that is all I have for the demo. So another thing is to kind of talk about is how to implement ChatOps in your environment is how do you actually start doing this? And this is what I would say to that is if you wanted to do this in your environment is to start small, is to focus on initially read-only commands to get data from systems, learn how to operate the bot and how to write the plugins. Make it very easy to do the right thing, and that in the case of PowerShell is use parameter validation, use required parameters, be very explicit about what that command does and understand how it operates, and only allow people to go down the happy path of running that command. And how you can kind of gain acceptance about this type of way of working inside your environment is getting a champion. Getting someone that's not yourself, that is also very jazzed about using this and having them help evangelize that this is a good way of working, and have them celebrate some of the wins that they've had that you've enabled for them. You can also use this to have very low friction onboarding. You have a new person on the team, they join Slack, they can see all these commands that people are running and conversations that people are having, and they can get up to speed quicker on how that team operates. You can also focus on the low-hanging fruit, is write commands that solve real-world problems for you that are typically time sucks. They're typically very easy things, but you're doing them frequently, and they just kind of chip away at all your available time. You can write commands to solve them for you, and then give that command to someone else to be able to execute. So give that to someone in the service desk to run, or to someone in the business to run, and make it fun. You can add personality to the bot if you want. You can add funny messages to your commands to kind of brighten people's day. So and that's what I would kind of say to that. More from me. So. Again, my name is Brandon Olin. I'm Dev Black Ops on Twitter. DevBlackOps.io is my blog. Dev Black Ops is my GitHub handle. You can check out some of the projects I have there. These are some of the interesting projects that I'm working on. Saki, if people don't know what that is, that's a PowerShell build framework that's fairly popular out there. I am now the maintainer of that repository as of a couple months ago. Posh Origin is a provisioning framework very similar to Terraform, but uses DSC resources. Operation Validation Framework is a module written originally by Microsoft, and now I'm the maintainer of that, and that is a module. It's more of a framework for testing your infrastructure using Pester. That's a pretty interesting thing that I would encourage you to take a look at. And various other things here. A whole bunch of repositories and a bunch of modules that I publish on the PowerShell gallery. So that's all I have for you. I take any questions that people have now, if they have them.
Do you see any resistance to doing this from security managers?
I haven't personally. I would say that don't make it a surprise to them that this is going on. You definitely would want their buy-in and their input on how to do this safely. And you'd also, I would probably work with, if you were meeting resistance from them, I would work with them to, figure out how to mitigate that. And in this case, there are things you can do. In our case, Slack, we pay for Slack, so we have SAML authentication and AD authentication with Slack. So you have to be logged in using domain credentials into Slack and things like that. You can implement those command authorizations and permission schemes to lock down these commands if you need to do that. I would probably say that keep them as open as you can, especially for read-only information. You obviously would want to lock down commands that change the environment, but for things that are read-only in nature, tend to keep those as open as you can. So the question about have I integrated PoshBot into ServiceNow or Remedy? I have not. I have heard of someone who was looking at a ServiceNow plugin. It probably wouldn't be too much to work, at least for ServiceNow, if they have a decent REST API. I've also heard of people who are looking at it to add a Jira plugin as well. But that would be a plugin that you would probably want is something that integrates with your ticketing system. Thank you. So, any questions on the phone?
This was a great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So you can check out PoshBot itself at github.com/poshbot.io. That's an organization I set up that has some of these plugins that you've seen, like Giphy and Wolfram Alpha, but it also has the core PoshBot module itself out there. Encourage you to check it out. If people are interested in writing plugins and want to have those associated with the PoshBot.io organization, you can let me know, and we can create a repository under there, and you can have full rights to create your module or your plugin and get it out there and distribute it on the PowerShell gallery. Always looking for feedback on PoshBot itself, features that people like or they don't like, and always willing to accept changes as well. So pull requests are welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate you presenting for us tonight, Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a really cool presentation.
Yeah. Probably went a little long, but I would try. There's a lot of material to cover in PoshBot, and even more. There's a lot I skipped over.
Yeah, it's definitely something really neat, and it's something that I'm interested in implementing in our environment.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, once you kind of get bit by this bug, it's hard to let go. It's really fun to create modules and plugins and just interesting stuff to have people do. And the real value of this, like I said at the beginning, is enabling other people to do their work and not have unnecessary barriers and hoops to jump through to get work done. If someone is authorized and it makes sense business-wise for them to do something, give them a command to do it, and don't make them create a service desk ticket and wait 4 days for someone to get to it. You can just give them a function to run it and give them, effectively a self-service portal is what this is. They will like it. Never saw the trout throwing. Oh, so that is, someone wrote that. That was a pull request that someone added because you always need to have a slap command. That's what that is. That is the one funny thing that gets shipped with PoshBot itself, is the slap command.
Sorry if I missed this, but I noticed that this is with Slack. Could this possibly work with HipChat?
It could. So the couple issues with various chat providers. With Slack, it's very easy to connect with WebSockets, and that's what PoshBot does internally. Is it connects to a WebSocket connection. It authenticates to Slack using the token you provide. Slack returns back with a custom URL that you connect to with WebSockets. And basically from then on, PoshBot is just receiving a stream of JSON messages, and it parses them and figures out what to do with them. So that allows PoshBot to be able to get executed from a machine that's inside your network, and there is no communication from Slack. Slack is not initiating the communication into PoshBot. PoshBot is connecting into it and then receiving messages. If HipChat can also do a WebSocket connection, it's very easy to create a backend for it. That is one of the issues with Teams, is that currently Teams does not support a WebSocket connection. So the bot model for Teams is that it wants to send a webhook to a public URL. So it'll send a JSON payload with authorization, but it expects that URL to be a public endpoint. And then you accept that message and authorize it and then go do something with it. So in order to do that with PoshBot, you would have to expose, I would have to write a very simple web server in PoshBot that would listen on a URL, and then you'd have to expose that URL to the public. And that's when you start running into more security type barriers once you need to start doing those types of things.
Thank you.
Yep. I am brainstorming ways on how to work around that with some Azure services. So maybe having like a very simple Azure function that is your public endpoint that Teams could post to. You would do some very basic authorization of that message, and then maybe have PoshBot connect to, an event hub or something like that in Azure, and that your Azure function would post messages into Event Grid or Event Hub, and then PoshBot would connect into that. So you don't have Slack or Teams initiating the communication into your environment. You would always have that communication initiated from the inside out. Okay, so did anyone else have any other questions?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to me. Listen to me drone on about ChatOps.
Well, thanks for presenting.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, well, I think we'll wrap this one up for tonight, and I want to thank you again, Brandon, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks at the PowerShell Summit.
Sounds good. Again, thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
All right, you too.